Welcome, everyone. This is exciting to have an in-depth conversation with Eitan Hersh, the author of Politics is for Power, and as I mentioned a moment ago, how to move beyond political hobbyism, take action, and make real change. So Eitan is based in the Boston area, but is now a nomad and visit around being free, I presume, from your teaching duties for a while anyway, and moving around in Providence, I think you mentioned before, Eitan. So let's begin. I'll ask the first question. This is conversational style, Eitan, and I'll ask the first question, and then we'll just have others ask questions or make comments.
Sure.
Yeah.
Don't be afraid to tell me a little context about, what you're working on as part of your questions. I know we sometimes shy away from questions that are more of a comment, but I'd love to hear any comments you have also, so I can learn from you as well.
Oh, good. Yes, we are an activist group. We really focus towards action. We're a long-standing, we're 2.5 years, we meet weekly, which gives us a lot of power. A lot of our groups around here, clubs and teams, they meet monthly. We discovered a little bit by accident back in 2.5 years ago to meet weekly. And it just means we move with much more power and depth and momentum building and relationship building. And I certainly fit into this category. Even now, sometimes I think I fit into this category. As part of your subtitle, what is political hobbyism, and did you create that term, or what does it mean, and how does it hold us back?
Yeah, so as far as I know, I created the term. When I was thinking about, for some context, I mostly study pretty narrow statistical questions of politics. I do a lot of stuff related to voting rights, in particular, things like voter ID laws and stuff like that. And this, I wanted to really take a step back from that and look at this question of what on earth are people doing when they say they're doing politics? Because you look at the amount of time people are spending on politics, and it's a lot of people are spending 2 hours a day. That's all they talk about. But if you look at what they're doing, it's hard to describe it as politics. It's something closer to sports fandom, really. And so hobbyism, there's some terms that have been floating around for a while. One term is slacktivism, you might have heard, which usually is slacktivism would be like signing an online petition or changing your Facebook profile to a gay rights flag, this kind of thing. There's always been news junkies, the kind of people who are obsessed with 538, following polls and things like that. And then I think most people actually, though, the most amount of their time is spent on something a little bit different. It's more like being an amateur pundit. It's like sharing news with commentary. Here's what's important. Here's my take. It's almost as if if you go on Twitter, which I don't think anyone really should do, but if you go on Twitter, it's like every person who's just a regular person, not a politician, feels the need to basically have a press release with their opinion on everything that's happened, even though they're not really in the business of press releases in general. So, I think when I looked at what amounts to people's political behavior, so that's news consumption, partisan cheerleading, kind of shallow forms of activism like petition signing, voting mostly only in presidential elections and not really caring at all about anything beneath the national level. I think this doesn't look like politics. This looks like a hobby. So that's where the term came from. And it is I should just say it's deliberately insulting, right? I've hoped to kind of painted with data a kind of a caricature of the political hobbyist, which many of us, including myself, which I say maybe in the first page or something like that, I'm guilty of. But it's not a caricature most of us would be proud of. There's something, there's an accusation in the word political hobbyist.
Yes. Good. Thank you. That is really helpful. As we open this up, thank you for giving your answer. Sometimes we have people, and you're a professional speaker, teacher, and all that. Some people, when I ask the first question, then you have to kind of wait for 20 minutes. So you're really good at focusing right into it. But I wanted to put Ali Banwell on the spot there. If you would unmute for a moment, Ali. because you told me something.
Hi, Richard.
Hi, Ali. Ali is the campaign manager for Eitan, Eitan, the campaign manager for Kate Schroeder, who is running for Congress here in Southwest Ohio. And so she's the campaign manager. But she also told me, as we were getting ready here, or I announced our meeting, what did you share with me, Ali?
Well, I'm trying to remember exactly what I shared with you, but I think it was that Professor Hersh here was really instrumental in getting me involved in politics and sort of waking up after 2016. I remember specifically, and I don't know if you'll remember this, Professor Hersh, but we had a class right after the 2016 election and people were just rattled. And at Yale, I mean, we had professors who were crying and weren't really willing to engage with what had happened. And Eitan called a friend of his in, I think, was it Nevada, who had voted for Trump, and had us listen to him while you talked with him and asked him why he was interested and why he had voted for Trump and why that was. And we all sat there, having been in this bubble, having been at Yale, having had no real interaction with Trump supporters. And it was the first time that somebody was like, no, you need to go listen and understand what these people are saying and not just cut it out and not just demonize it and actually engage. So that was really inspiring, and I gotten involved in politics. So this is a really great thing, and I won't take up the floor, but I'm really happy to see you, Eitan, and thanks for speaking to the group.
Yeah, that's
Thank you so much. That's so nice to hear. I only can see a green square with an A, but it's nice to see it's nice to hear you.
Yes, yeah.
I'm in the car doing my job, but I'm really happy to see you in a brief moment. Yeah.
Thank you. Yes, I do remember that moment very well because a lot of students didn't like it. I mean, basically it was right after the election, and the reason I did that, not to just hijack the conversation on this topic, but I think it's interesting, is that every year I always give my students an assignment where I require them to go to some kind of campaign event, and they have to write a paper about it. And I encourage them. I can't, force them. I say, go a little outside your bubble. Basically, no other time in your whole life are you going to go, if you're a Democrat, to a Republican event, or if you're a Republican to a Democratic event. But here it's for an assignment, so try it. And the papers were due the day of the election, and I made this kind of encouraging appeal a few times during the semester, and not a single student went to a party or election event different from their own home party. And on top of that, I think that in the kinds of environments like Yale or like where I now teach at Tufts, it's very easy to be in this bubble where the other side is not only stupid but evil, and that's not just the politicians, but every single voted for them. And I brought in someone to class who I love, a person who I grew up with from when I was a kid, and went down this path that is, just like this classic case of someone who goes down these online rabbit holes from gaming websites and is, basically kind of like a conspiracy theorist Trump voter. But I love this person. And I think we see moments of empathy and transformation when we let ourselves do it, but it's never going to be through sticking to the classroom at Yale or Tufts or anywhere similar like where we live. And I'm sure I'm preaching to the choir when I say that here.
Yes. Oh, that was good. And thank you, Ali. It means so much because Ali is the manager now, Eitan. So you could really be proud of her that she is
amazing, one
of the top U.S. Congress contests in the country because it's very gerrymandered Republican. But she's got this Democrat who is really on principles and on relational organizing and on the goodness of the whole district is really making a difference. So she has a giant job. Thanks for jumping in. Ali, who is next to share a comment or question with Eitan? Wow.
I've got one.
Maybe it's the mute button. No. Okay, great.
I was going to say, so you said that you don't like Twitter, or you don't think we should go on Twitter. But with everything going on, do you not agree with social platforms, or why do you not like Twitter? Or I guess I don't understand how you're going to connect with other people that are going to support your political ally if you don't go on social media.
So that's a great question. So I should say I do go on Twitter, unfortunately. I mean, why do I say unfortunately? For my job, Twitter is a helpful network among, for me, academics and journalists, and I think that part of Twitter, there's sort of an interesting. I think a lot of people probably have a version of this where there's like an interesting like professional part of, say, Twitter, where like I get information about new papers and a new court case that was filed, and a journalist contacts me and asks me for some, an opinion about something, and that's like the useful Twitter for me, and that's like 5% of the Twitter I see. Like 95% is like people who people including me just like pontificating on stupid stuff, I guess. My own experience is that for a lot of organizing groups, probably like yours, I think there is a real opportunity for social media to extend what they do locally on, reach more people, find more people. But most people are not starting that way. Most people are starting, of course, just from, say, Facebook or Twitter, and they never, basically because they seek out no information about how they can be engaged locally. And they also, like, the thing that gives them that like moment of catharsis is the video of someone shouting or some crazy thing happening. As I normally say, like, in political hobbyism, we're usually learning the wrong skills and practicing the wrong skills and learning the wrong information, right? So you have people who are spending, but this obviously doesn't apply to people in this Zoom room, but for most people, who are not, I don't mean people who don't care about politics. I mean people who really care about politics, who spend 2 hours a day on politics. If you ask them, like, okay, well, how should I get involved in police misconduct? How do I get involved, in activism around that, in activism around the environmental and economic development, whatever it is? They blush and say, like, I actually can't tell you anything useful that would help you learn how to be involved in politics. I don't know anything about that. Oh, you follow, you go to your friend who's a news junkie, you follow politics. Who should I vote for in the municipal election? And they blush again. They say, I actually don't know anything about that. I don't know the first thing. And actually what the only thing they're doing is like they're looking for some viral video that's going to make them feel momentarily satiated. Yeah. So I don't think it's like, look, I think for some activist groups that I've talked to and some that are profiled in the book, they have literally no online presence. And that doesn't, depending on the context, that doesn't really diminish their power locally. The fact is, if they can get 100 people in a room with their police chief, if they can get 100 people in the room with their mayor who are locals, those politicians listen with great care. And if they can get 100 people to say, maybe I'll RSVP to some online event, no one cares. If they can't also bring those people, if they really can't bring those people together in a way that like threatens votes. And so I guess my take is, I'm not like anti-social media. I think it has its uses, but I think the way that I kind of wrote the book was targeted toward like the typical news junkie. That was kind of the person in my mind's eye. It was like, here's the person. I'm sure you know a ton of people like this. Yes. who like, most of them probably hate Trump. Most of them, maybe they watch cable news or they're on social media a lot, and they don't. Either they don't want to, or most likely they just don't know what steps they could possibly take to do anything more. And actually, a lot of them, I should say, the book has these, as you mentioned at the beginning, Richard, that there's a political hobbyism, and then there's this. Can I unmute myself? Okay. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Oh. so there's the word power. A lot of people who are these news junkies are actually, they don't like the word power. A lot of people, not only is hobbyism off-putting, but the idea that one would want to pursue political power is also off-putting. It feels
What is
icky.
power for you?
Right, it feels icky. Like, what does that mean? When I think of power, I just mean is getting people to do something that they wouldn't otherwise do. Plain and simple. You know, you can get, if you have political power because you've gotten a neighbor to vote the way you want, or you've gotten a politician who's in office to vote on a bill the way you want, just like, you know, I have 3 little kids behind this wall here. If, you know, if I can get them to take a bath, you know, without coercion, you know, that's democratic power in a certain way. And so I think people are uncomfortable with both parts of that. The hobbyism they know doesn't feel right. It is shallow. It's not doing anything. But the power feels a little bit scary or icky, or they don't know what to do with that. So the book is trying to get people to be uncomfortable knowing that hobbyism is bad, and comfortable with the idea that, like, they have a job to do as citizens.
That's right, making a difference. Yes. Who's next with a question? Or yes,
Matt
Marie.
McGuire. Matt McGuire has his hand up.
Thank you, Matt.
So the only question that I have, I understand your take on people on Twitter, but we literally can't get 100 people in a room with our mayor right now. So what other options do you see?
Can you get 20? Can you get 10?
Any? No. Not
Well, it's not because we don't have the power to get them there. It's the virus that keeps us from.
Oh, yeah. Okay, so sorry. Yes, that's right. Good point. Yes, so I think that, right, a Zoom meeting, which is obviously like a much bigger, a much sort of closer replica to an in-person meeting, is really different than a petition, an online petition.
Yes.
Right. So, you know, basically when people have to pay some cost and put their name or face in front of you and say, I'm here because I care about this issue, that matters a lot. And knowing, for a politician to know that someone cares long term, you know, that makes it such a huge difference. So for example, you know, in many towns across the country, you could get, because of, you know, the Black Lives Matters protests showed up, and they were making really actually concrete demands in many cases. And the question is, who's going to then show up at the select board meeting, city council meeting, and say, okay, let's follow up here. Let's talk exactly about how police oversight happens. When there is a complaint to the police department, is it the police department itself that navigates that complaint, or is there an independent body? And how do you make those decisions? And, you know, basically being annoying, you know, and being persistent. That, you know, I think what we know in a lot of forms of engagement, whether it's voter contact, the more personal, the more persistent it is, the better, right? We know that if you want to get someone to vote, having a neighbor on their street talk to them face to face is better than having a stranger talk to them face to face, which is better than having a mailer, which is better than having a robocall, which, et cetera. The closer the closer it is to them, the more personal it is. The more effective it is. And we've demonstrated that, political scientists have, with like years of experiments. And I think it's the same on the, you know, and of course on the legislative side, you see that, you know, you see how kind of congressional offices deal with this, right? Like a form letter means less than a real letter, which means less than a constituent calling them, which means less than constituents visiting them. And so, you know, I think that transitioning to COVID life, the more things that replicate that personal touch are the things that are gonna be more effective.
Yeah, good. Marie.
Oh. The same question. So.
Wow, that's good. Who's next?
I got a question.
Yes, Dan. Or who was that?
Dan, but he's on mute.
You have to unmute.
Okay.
Good.
Is there any research regarding the best approach or arguments to use with independent voters? What tends to motivate them, the majority of them, let's say?
So there's independent voters are a strange bunch. And that's because most of them are closeted partisans. most independents, something like 80% of them, behave just like partisans on a lot of dimensions. They vote as consistently for one side. There's two political scientists, Yana Krupnikov and Samara Klar, who have this line, which I think I quote in the book, something like, they have all the independents tend to have a lot of bad qualities of partisans, which is like they want to never compromise and things like that, and they have none of the good qualities of like participation. So I think the first thing is figuring out, when you're talking to an independent, which kind of independent you're talking to. If you're in Ohio and you're using the voter file in Ohio, you'll see many, many more independents than if you look at Pennsylvania. In Pennsylvania, almost no one on the voter file is listed as independent because of their closed primary rules. So you're in a kind of a different world in different states. And then there are independents there are people who are independents for a different reason, which is it's not that they hate the Democrats and Republicans, they just hate politics. That's like a kind of another type of independent. They're not going to respond to where the first kind of independent would respond to are sitting and watching Rachel Maddow, okay, and they're super partisan, and there's another kind of independent who just hates politics so much that you could approach them about a specific issue. But the moment it enters into a Democrat-Republican world, they don't like it. If you're interested in research, I think research by, if you look at Yana Krupnikov, she's at Stony Brook, you'll find some great stuff about independence there. I don't know how helpful that is, but.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, and we describe ourselves, Eitan, which we are, is an activist grassroots group. We are independent. We are not actually within any party, but we are aligned. That's how we say we're aligned. We're independent but aligned, and we're aligned because we have what we call a social contract, which is a contract of values. We are dedicated to these values, and one of our teams defined what those values are, and so then we look for candidates who we feel are aligned with those. So when we were touched, and all of a sudden candidates were asking us, can you endorse us? And we said, hey, we're a little grassroots activist group.
Yep.
You want our endorsement. And so eventually we worked out a method that we send them a questionnaire and then follow up with talking to them about the values. How do you feel about these values that we're committed to as political activists? And so we're one of those independents that leans a lot towards Democrats because their values tend more often to be like the ones we hold.
Yeah, let me just say a couple more things on this because, I think in the book, I know in the book, there's 7 profiles of different activists, and they're kind of from different worlds. There's one who's maybe similar to yours, that it's officially nonpartisan group. It's in Westmoreland County, Pennsylvania. It's a kind of a progressive group in a pretty very, very, very Republican area. And when they talk about talking to independents who are voters, they think about really reaching out to people who probably voted for Trump, and so everything about this group, it doesn't, they're not called like the Resistance Movement. They're called Voice of Westmoreland. They have a very, very wide range of people who come to it. The leader of it tells me that the best canvasser that they have is this 9-year-old girl who walks to people's doors and knocks on doors, and she says, I'm concerned about grandparents getting insulin. I love my grandparents. That's why I'm here. And it's very disarming when the kid does that.
Yeah.
And actually, I opened the book with a story from this group where this guy who was a Trump voter, evangelical, pro-life guy enters this monthly meeting of this progressive group, and he introduces himself as this way. I'm, pro-life, I'm evangelical, et cetera, et cetera. And people are like shifting in their seats, like, oh God, like, why is this person here? Is he going to protest our meeting? Like, and then he says, I'm here because I'm a Christian and there's no such thing as a racist Christian. And he goes into the kind of, for him, why he made this transformation over time. And what I point out is how welcoming the group was to someone like him. Not every group can do that well. But when they're going to independence, that's a lot what they're thinking of. There's other groups my favorite story in this whole book is this 98-year-old guy called the Ukrainian boss who controls 1,000 votes in his neighborhood, and in his old age home, he has his precinct has 3 times the turnout of all the precincts around him because, and here this is not about talking to independents who voted for Trump. This is about a fairly insular community, and there's a couple other examples like this in the book of immigrant communities that they're bonded together from an immigration experience or whatever, and the trick there is for the organizers to try to activate people who are also independent in the sense that they don't really, they don't care much about politics, and getting them on board with an agenda. Yeah. So it's just vastly different in different contexts.
Yeah, good. Yes, good. Thank you, Eitan. Who's next? Yes, Marie.
So I have a question about the fact that Democrats in general vote less than Republicans. So do you have an analysis and opinion about that, and what can we do to bring Democrats to the poll and vote?
Sorry, can you repeat the question?
Yeah. So in general, Democrats are voting less than Republicans. And I wonder whether you have an explanation for the cause of this and what can be done to make sure that we recruit the Democrats to go and vote in November.
Good question. So yeah, I mean, turnout varies different. So the question is, right, do Democrats vote less than Republicans, and in what context do they, and how do you rectify turnout differences? And it really varies a lot by context. But one thing I'll say is that right now we have this big population of younger people, so say like age 18 to 30, who are overwhelmingly Democratic. And it's a very nomadic stage of life they're in. Not just because everyone at that age was nomadic, but because of much delayed marriage and children compared to previous generations. There's really a long period of time before people buy a home, settle down, have kids, get themselves into preschools, feel connected to a community that's like, this is my place and I'm investing in it. And that's a real big challenge, especially when it comes to any kind of local political action. People don't have the same roots put down until they're much older. And so, I think there's reforms like, same day registration, which is designed for the nomadic people to try to get this residence-based voting system we have to accommodate people who move residence every 8 months, whatever. I mean, ask any 25-year-old, like, where do they live? And, they're probably, they don't know. They're kind of not sure yet. So I think there's that. That's really the main issue. Obviously, older voters tend to be Republican, and those tend to be more stable voters who never miss an election. And again, particularly on the local stuff, it makes this huge difference, right? We have this big nationalization phenomenon happening where everyone is paying so much more attention to national politics than to local politics. And that's actually true across the board in terms of age, but it's especially true among younger people. It's actually, it's maybe surprising, but it's especially true among kind of college-educated people. The people who are college educated are least likely to actually follow local news. They've abandoned local newspapers. They get the New York Times and the Wall Street Journal. They've abandoned local TV broadcasts where they might get, something about the weather and something about a fire and then something also about, so they're least connected, and they think, and I think this is really an obsession on the Democratic side that makes it very different than the Republican side. They think that the only thing that matters is control of the national government. And if you ask them what issues they care about, they say, oh, the big issues are, we're faced are the environment. That's probably number one for Democrats right now. They'll say racial equality. And then you say, like, okay, but you know what regional transportation has to do with the environment? You know what the police department and the school department have to do with racial equality? And they say, kind of boring, it's beneath me, it's parochial, it's not, and this is true from kind of funders, people who fund political activity. They think, kind of parochial nonsense, and it's true among your kind of everyday news junkie. And it's even true, some of you might know this group ALEC, which does state policy activism on the right. And so they do these model bills, like they were involved in like the, what's it called? The bill that allows you in Florida and some other states to shoot someone who you think is endangering you. They work on these model bills. It's a conservative group, mostly business oriented. And ALEC is not that, in the grand scheme of things, I think its funding is like $100 million a year, which in terms of how much money is spent on politics is not much. And there is no real equivalent of on the Democratic side, which is sort of amazing. And the scholars who work on this say, well, yeah, the funders don't really care. It's kind of beneath them. State legislature is kind of boring.
Yeah. Wow. Thank you. We have time for one more question. Jenna.
Hello. Thanks for talking with us tonight, Eitan.
My pleasure.
So I have this question that involves how the issues of our time seem to be going of acceptability. This Overton window concept where it just keeps being pushed further and further and further away from us of what we deem acceptable in society. And a lot of it is around conspiracy theories or groups that are forming. And how do you reach out to people beyond these conspiracy theories where they don't have facts, and it's just like forming around opinion? So it's really hard sometimes to talk to the other side when you're not talking about facts. It feels like emotional opinion.
Yeah, I mean, what I would say, and by the way, I hope we have time. Leslie, who I see and wrote in the text, let's get to her question too, because she had an academic question. We got to know what it is. Okay, so, look, what I would say about your question is that there's so much low-hanging fruit in this world that talking to a avid conspiracy theorist or someone who spends all their time on listening to talk radio, or it's no different than if I'm here a Patriots fan, I love the Patriots. If I want to convince someone to like the Patriots, the first person I would go is not I wouldn't go to New York and start trying to make new Patriots fans. And I think that I've noticed even in my own activism how I live in one of these blue bubbles, kind of 90% Democratic voting places, and most of my friends who are, both good and sophisticated people, they don't know who to vote for in a local election. They don't know who to vote for in a state election. If they want to, and they actually want to take action that's in support of their own values, but they need to defer to someone. And I think there's just so many people out there whose votes are ready to be gotten by someone who is wanting to help them, that going after the conspiracy theorists is, I think, is just too low on the priority list.
Yeah. Thank you. And yes, let's end now. I'm sorry. It's a great sign that Eitan has a popularity here of being in the conversation. But part of the reason we're successful, Eitan, is, and I know you've got 3 kids that you need to persuade towards the bathtub probably. But one of the reasons we're successful is we start on time and end on time week after week. So we have a lot of work still to do. But one last question, Leslie. And you'll have to unmute, Leslie.
Yeah, so...
Go ahead.
Oh, sorry. Is this Ann or me?
Go ahead.
We can hear you, yes.
Okay. Allie and I were talking about this in advance of this call. I also work for Pittsburgh, same thing with Allie. I think oftentimes the people that we send out to be canvassers or agents of the campaign actually have really deep partisan views, whether or not they align super closely with the candidate. And those are not the people that canvassers are actually trying to do, right? That's not your persuasion leaders who's talking to.
Leslie, it's, at least for me, it's really hard to, your connection is kind of fading in and out quite a bit.
Stop moving your head when you talk.
Okay. Can you just talk about this problem that the principal agent problem, and how the people who knock doors often are not actually the best people to be the persuaders?
Sure. So, I think I remember an experience, I think during one of the Obama elections, where this political science student came to me, said he went to Iowa, and, what a waste of time talking to voters. Like, he said none of them knew who Rousseau was. And I said,
School board member.
What are you doing talking to anyone about Rousseau? The French philosopher. And, and that was like, so look, the research shows that when you're talking to voters on the door, the personal connection is the thing that's going to get them. I think that I'm sure anyone who's been canvassing in their own neighborhood experiences this. If you go canvass in your neighborhood, and if I go to the apartment building next to mine and I say, hey, I live in the apartment building next to yours, immediately what's going on in the voter's head is like, oh, I can't be a jerk because I'm going to see this person walking, down the street. Versus if you go to a complete strange place to you and you say, hey, I'm canvassing in New Hampshire from Massachusetts, people say, get out of here. If it's not a residential connection, then it has to be some kind of personal connection. I mean, I find that the people who are so good at canvassing, the people who I profile in the book as kind of exemplary volunteer activists, they're not the kids who came out of my political science class sitting in the front row, raising their hand, knowing every answer. For one thing, those are all dudes, and as you all probably know, 70% of activists right now are women, and male or female, it's people who practice empathy, who are good at making eye contact, who are good at listening, who focus on listening, who are just totally disarming. I remember, so Angela, who's my activist friend who's profiled in one of the chapters in the book in Westmoreland County, she was telling me about a story about going to someone's door, and the second they came to the door, the person said, they see her with her clipboard and they say, I don't want to pay more taxes. That was what the person at the door said. And my reaction, if I went to a door and someone said, I don't want to pay more taxes, and I was canvassing on the Democratic side, I would say, oh, God, here's another person who's not going to be into this. It's going to be an awkward conversation. But Angela said, no. What you say instead is, I hate paying taxes too. Isn't it terrible? We pay all this money, and the roads aren't built well, and not enough people have health care, and I'm mad as hell about it. And that is something that that voter she talked to really responded to. It wasn't my first instinct, but I'm not an expert canvasser. She is. And I think it's that special something that makes some people good at being good listeners and being nice people. That's like the spark that's behind canvassing. It's just sort of trying to replicate a real life relationship.
Yeah, thank you. As much as I'd love to have more questions, we need to move on. I would like to recommend highly, it's hard to see in the glare, Politics is for Power by Eitan Hersh, and you'll see it in the notes and actions and other places there. If you don't mind, before you leave, Eitan, is to put into the chat your favorite way to be followed, if there is one, that you kind of reveal your interest, your theories, your research.
Oh, God. I don't have something like that. I have a website, and but I don't.
Website's fine.
Yeah, I'll have that,
Just
and I'll put a link to the book if anyone wants to get it.
Sure. And think of us as your pod out here, your groupie pod out here in Southwest Ohio that believes in your work, and perhaps we'll set up a time, if there's interest among our group, to do we do book discussions. So where people really, a few of us have read it, and so we'll do that too. But I do need to say goodbye with great thanks. Please thank your 3 children and your wife for lending you out.
My pleasure. So nice to meet you all. I hope to one day meet you in person, but I would be happy to do a book talk too, if anyone want to talk about that. But let's hope one day I can meet all of you in a monthly or weekly meeting that you're having with bursting at the seams.
Thank you so much. Bye, Eitan. Thank you so much.
Pleasure.
It was really good. Thank you. And I apologize for some of you that did not get your questions or comments into Eitan, but we do have a lot of work. We work as political activists to build a bold new democracy that is passionate, progressive, powered by people. 15 weeks, 11 weeks until voting begins. This is getting close. If you wish to follow the agenda with the links and all, here's the link here, but also Dan Schatzer, who is our wonderful website guru, has it in the chat. You'll see this, I think, is that correct?
Yes,
Dan?
it's at the very, very top of the chat.
Very top, if you wish to follow the links rather than copying and pasting and all. It'll come out with the notes and actions from this meeting. So we've had this session with Eitan and now Kate Schroeder, and we have two of the candidates. We had Ali on earlier, but I know we have Noah and Leslie has been here with us too. Both of the great team, the Schroeder team is with us. And Noah, are you going to be, as the field organizer, be sharing these actions with us?
Yes, I will be.
Okay, great. And pardon me one second, Noah. And Marie, would you mind being our timekeeper again? And you might have to unmute, Marie.
Sure, I can do that.
Okay, thank you. So you'll hear a little timer. Sorry to be so mean about timing it, but it helps us keep our focus. I hope it keeps your focus as well. Noah, this is your time to share with us what's happening and how can we help the Schroeder campaign.
Yes, and Richard, I just wanted to let you know, I don't mind being recorded, but I just wanted to let you know that you're recording in case you wanted to have that stopped.
Oh, thank you. That was a great reminder. Now let me figure out how I do that to unrecord this. With the screen sharing, I'm not seeing the unrecord. I'm going to turn this off for a moment and then thank you so much. And then pause the, do you want to stop the iCloud recording